and then technological reasons as well. Okay. So again, that book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, kind of emphasizes this idea that if you just have better technology, better tools to take over another team, it's just going to be much easier, right? So for a bunch of us in this room who are trying out for volleyball, you can think of it as when it's your turn to send the ball over, the net is lowered by a foot. And when your opposing team has to get the ball over, we raise the net 1 foot higher, right? And so who's it going to be easier to get the ball over for? Team with the lower net, right? It's going to be easier to spike the ball as well and serve the ball. Okay. Some motives that we discuss for colonization is you have the Industrial Revolution, so they are looking for more raw material, more resources to keep funding the new products that they're making. You have a degree of nationalism, so many European nations and countries, I don't think there's anywhere to write this stuff down, so just follow along. Many European countries, as we'll look at in some of the other chapters, just want to expand their empire, their territory. Nationalism is something you learn more in grade 11, and it's more developed and advanced in that course as well. Missionary activity, so again, spreading religion, spreading their faith. Having a military or navy influence as well to protect yourself, and as I've been learning over the last year or so, to protect local groups as well. Okay, there's a nice article I read a couple weeks ago about how the RCMP saved the Blackfoot people by banning alcohol and making sure that people from America weren't coming north into Canada and selling illegal alcohol, which was causing a lot of problems in those communities. So, the RCMP could be seen or viewed as an extension of some sort of military expansion, right? You have a legal system in place to protect people. Places to dump unwanted or excessive population. Some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be, but Australia, the land filled with deadly animals, snakes, and things that can kill you every step of the way, was a prison island, right? So the British would take their worst prisoners and they would just ship them off to Australia. I don't know what they saw in Australia. They must have landed and just seen the outback desert and thought, wow, this is a great place for people we don't want. Good luck surviving out there, buddy. Well, eventually over time, those people survived, and there's now a colony established there. But Australia was used to dump unwanted people. Many people left parts of Europe as well because there was just no freedom, no room to grow, no place to have their own life. Right? So a lot of people left England, a lot of people left Ireland, countries like that, to just start their own life in North America. Okay. Social and economic opportunities, very related to the last point. So if you're a peasant in England, it's better to place your bets on yourself in a brand new country no one wants to go to than to remain a peasant, low-class person in England, right? It's like if you're broke and you need money, it's better to flip burgers than to keep suffering being broke, right? That's kind of a similar mindset. It's better to just take a minimum wage job than to not have any money at all. Humanitarian reasons, so your course doesn't kind of talk nearly as much about this aspect of, let's say, imperialism, of colonization. Even for myself, I've had to go in and learn more on my own. What were some of the humanitarian things being done in these countries that Europeans showed up to that benefited the local people? Okay, so I'll try to bring in as much of that as well. This last one's tricky, and I would honestly probably remove this. I just hadn't reviewed this PowerPoint, but yeah, I don't even know if I'm going to talk about that. We'll eventually get into what white man's burden is and social Darwinism, and I would say that had less to do with colonization and more to do with other, like assimilation and other things that we'll look at. Okay, so there's a variety of ways that imperialism works. So you have economic imperialism as well. So you don't just have to show up to a country with a big gun and say like, we run this place now. You also have economic imperialism, right? So if you have a lot of money, you going to another place, especially a place that is underdeveloped, and being able to establish a business, put some investments in, and make a profit. So this second point I would also alter as well, because it's not obvious that people were putting pressure on the governments to acquire new markets, or if there was just a big demand for goods that were becoming easier and easier to make. Right, so think about it in this way, like clothes are very easy to make now, they can be very cheap, people buy a lot of them, and so you're just constantly looking for more material to make more stuff to be able to sell it, because that's what people want, right? Same with food. So these things kind of go hand in hand, right? There's a, now that during the Industrial Revolution, now that things are easier to make, they're cheaper on each individual, people want more of them, right? A big thing during this time period was felt hats. So they would hunt beavers, they would hunt like just various animals and use their fur to make hats, to make coats. Quite frankly, because using animal fur is actually, animal fur coats and hats are actually, they keep you very warm. So they're very useful, especially when it's -40 outside. How many of you wear synthetic gloves? Like, well, I don't think many of you wear gloves at all in winter. How many of you wear gloves and your hands still get cold? Right? If you were to use an animal product, it's much less likely that your hands will get cold, right? Because those animals live outside all the time. They're designed for that. And so there is a connection between it's now easier to buy stuff, to make stuff, and so now the demand goes up, now that everyone can get a hold of it. Okay. We'll save that last point for later on in the course. Again, I don't know how accurate this first sentence is, but the second point emphasizes that once Europeans left Europe, they encountered new items, new products, things that they didn't have in Europe. Okay, I'm aware spices and salt was one of them, I think. Okay. The spices for sure. Okay. Bananas, I don't know if I still have it in my course, but does anyone know about, I think they're called the Banana Wars, or Banana Republics they're called. In South America, the Banana Republics are essentially like these companies that would grow fruit in Central and South America, and they would run them like military dictatorships. And they got pretty bad, right? There's points where the local people were protesting against some worker rights violations, land issues, and the owners of these companies, the Banana Republics, they basically got their armed guards to just open fire on these protests and just kill people in mass. Right? So bananas were a big deal, okay? So political imperialism as well, okay? Having more land meant you had more wealth. Nowadays it's something that we don't necessarily connect together, right? But people who own their own property, own their own house, generally speaking, they're wealthier. If you have land and you're free to do what you want on that land, well, you can grow food on there, you can raise animals, then you're much more independent. I actually went to do a farm tour yesterday with my nieces, and these people, they do a lot of organic farming, raising animals and grass-fed. But the gentleman who owned the farm was explaining that they dug out a big area in their property, and now they're able to store, I think he was saying something like 1.5 million gallons of water there, just rainwater that gets stored onto their land. And so, again, this idea that land gives you some sort of strategic political power is quite useful, right? And so it makes sense for many of these countries then to start acquiring more land, improve their position on the global front. this third point here. So a country's strategic location also provided incentives for colonizing it. Okay, how many of you know about the Suez Canal? Okay. A couple of you. I'm going to point it out on the map. The Suez Canal is right here. For those of you looking, it's kind of in Egypt. So imagine if you controlled the little river crossing here. They actually built it. It's artificial, right? So instead of having to take your boats all the way around Africa, now you can just go through and you can get to parts of Asia, right? So owning and operating that Suez Canal.
Did a boat get stuck in there?
I think, yeah.
The giant boat, it was like an evergreen.
The Evergreen, I think it got stuck in the Suez Canal. I don't 100% remember, but.
It was too big.
Strategic locations, strategic military bases, navy bases, countries, they can make a big impact on the mother country's political power, their economic power, their influence as well. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So in terms of humanitarian reasons, so when we're looking at imperialism, and again, some of this stuff will make more sense as we start looking more into the materials, into the chapters as well. But this idea that you need to civilize or modernize the world, right? Which is quite interesting, right? Because nowadays we look back and think that is racist. They destroyed their culture, or they wanted